Ever get the feeling like you're kind of missing out on some sort of secret code?
Yeah.
Especially when you're, talking with native English speakers. That's what we're doing today. We're diving deep into that code, like that world of American English idiom.
They really do. Idioms, they add color, they add nuance to the language.
Right.
They reflect cultural values, shared experiences.
Yeah.
And they can be really tricky, especially for non-native speakers, to grasp.
Yeah.
But they're essential for truly mastering the language.
Absolutely. So we are using this ebook as our guide.
Okay.
It breaks down 50 common idioms with clear explanations and examples. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand these expressions, but be able to use them confidently in your own conversations. Hopefully.
That's right. It's about more than just vocabulary. It's about gaining fluency and cultural insight.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
The ebook starts with idioms that use nature imagery,
Okay.
which feels very intuitive. We're all connected to the natural world in some way.
Absolutely. Nature provides a rich source of metaphors for human experiences. Take, for instance, "you rock." Such a simple phrase, but it conveys such a powerful message of approval and admiration, even though, obviously, no one's literally made of stone.
Right. It's that underlying meaning that can be so tricky to grasp.
It is.
Calm before the storm is another great example.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that the literal meaning,
Yeah,
but it's so much more than just the weather, isn't it?
precisely. Think about the anticipation and suspense before a major life event or a crucial business deal or even a historical turning point. There's often a palpable stillness before everything changes. And that's the essence of calm before the storm.
I never thought about it that way, but that's so true. Under the weather is another one. It sounds so much gentler than just saying, I'm sick.
Yeah. The author actually notes that adding a bit softens it even further, like, I'm feeling a bit under the weather. It's a way to kind of acknowledge your illness without being overly dramatic.
And it's interesting how these subtle word choices can shift the tone of the entire phrase. Now, for an idiom that captures that feeling when everything seems to go wrong at once, when it rains, it pours. Right.
Yeah.
What a great one.
The author ties this idiom to the year 2020, which was a pretty challenging year for most of us.
Right.
She says between the pandemic, the political unrest, and the economic uncertainty, it truly felt like when it was raining, it was pouring.
Oh, yeah. That's a powerful example of how idioms can connect language to current events.
Yeah.
Speaking of commitment, rain or shine emphasizes that unwavering dedication to doing something regardless of the circumstances.
Right, a true testament to perseverance. Imagine a marathon runner who trains every day, rain or shine. They're not going to let a little bad weather, derail their goals.
Okay, here's a classic that I'm guilty of using a little too often. Every cloud has a silver lining. Sometimes it feels a bit forced to find the positive in a tough situation.
Right. Well, the author actually suggests adding, to acknowledge that nuance. So it's like saying, look, I know things are rough right now, but maybe there's a tiny glimmer of hope somewhere.
Right, it makes it more relatable. It's not about denying the difficulty, it's about acknowledging the possibility of something good emerging. Now, go with the flow is an idiom that seems simple on the surface, but I think it speaks to a much deeper quality, doesn't it?
You're right. It's not just about passively accepting whatever happens. It's about adaptability, resilience, even emotional intelligence. It's that ability to adjust your sails when the winds change.
Right.
To navigate the unexpected twists and turns of life.
Yeah.
The author, who's a parent, points out how crucial this skill is when you're raising kids.
All right.
Because as we all know, plans rarely go as expected.
So true. Parenting is like a masterclass in going with the flow. Speaking of adjustant, down to earth is a quality that I really admire in people. What about you?
I do too, yeah. It describes someone who's grounded, practical, and relatable, regardless of their status or achievements.
Right.
It's interesting that the author points out how often this idiom is used to describe celebrities who defy expectations. Those who, manage to stay humble and genuine despite their fame and fortune.
It's that authenticity that shines through. Now, tip of the iceberg always sends shivers down my spine. It's that stark reminder that what we see is often just a tiny fraction of a much larger and often hidden problem.
The author uses the example of witnessing a parent yelling at their child in public. It's a disturbing scene.
Oh, yeah.
But it also begs the question, what's happening behind closed doors?
Right.
It encourages us to kind of think critically and consider the unseen complexities beneath the surface.
That's a powerful reminder to look beyond the obvious, nip it in the bud.
Yes.
Take an action before a problem grows out of control. And I can totally relate to the author's anecdote about her son telling a little white lie. It seems harmless at the time, but she recognized the need to address that behavior before it became a pattern.
It speaks to the importance of early intervention, whether it's addressing a child's behavior,
Right.
or catching a health issue early on, or confronting a problem in a relationship before it festers.
So true. Sometimes those small steps that we take early on can prevent, bigger issues down the road.
Yeah.
Now, for an idiom that I'm probably a bit too familiar with, beat around the bush, it's that tendency to avoid the main point.
Right.
To dance around an uncomfortable truth.
Yeah, it's definitely not seen as a positive trait.
No.
It suggests a lack of directness and clarity, which can be frustrating for the listener.
Right. It's like you're trying to get to a destination, but taking the most roundabout route possible. Okay, enough beating around the bush. Let's move on to the next category.
Okay.
Animal idioms.
Okay.
This first one is a doozy. Go cold turkey. It means to quit something abruptly and completely. But the origin of the phrase is a bit unexpected.
The imagery is quite striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
It refers to the appearance of someone who's suddenly withdrawn from an addictive substance.
Yeah.
Like their skin resembling a cold plucked turkey.
Ooh.
Yeah. It kind of paints a vivid picture of the physical and emotional discomfort that often accompanies, such a drastic change.
Wow, I never knew that. That makes the idiom so much more impactful knowing where it comes from.
Uh-huh.
Now go on a wild goose chase, that just sounds frustrating.
It does, yeah. It perfectly captures the feeling of a futile, pointless pursuit.
Uh-huh.
It's like trying to catch a flock of geese. They're elusive and unpredictable. The author actually shares this hilarious personal story about searching for molasses in Paris.
Ah, tell me about it.
Oh, it's so funny. She went to 4 different stores, getting increasingly exasperated before she finally found it.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of those moments in life when you feel like you're on this ridiculous quest for something that should be simple to find.
Right.
But it's not.
And lastly, for animal idioms, we have cry wolf. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of dishonesty. The author connects it back to that classic fable, but then brings it into a modern context by talking about weather forecasters who exaggerate hurricane warnings.
It's a great example of how idioms can transcend time and context.
Yeah.
The core message remains the same. When you repeatedly lie or exaggerate,
Right.
you erode trust and lose credibility.
Yeah.
And then when the real wolf or the real hurricane comes along,
Right.
no one will believe you.
It's a reminder that honesty is always the best policy.
Yeah.
Even if it means delivering uncomfortable truths. Now let's move on to a category that's a bit more palatable: food idioms. Who doesn't love a good food metaphor? Bring home the bacon.
The quintessential idiom for earning a living and providing for your family.
Right.
It's interesting how it reflects those traditional gender roles.
Uh-huh.
The image of the father going out to work and bringing home the literal bacon to feed his family.
It does make you think about the evolution of language and how it reflects those societal norms. And speaking of perfect pairings, we have 2 peas in a pod, an idiom that just oozes with adorableness.
It conjures up that image of closeness,
Yeah.
compatibility, and shared characteristics, like 2 peas just snuggled together in a pod.
Mm-hmm.
They just belong together.
And then there's butter someone up,
Yes.
which is definitely not as innocent as it sounds.
Oh.
It's all about using flattery to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The author even warns about being wary of a child who suddenly showers you with compliments. There's probably an ulterior motive.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Children are masters of playing to our emotions, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
It's a classic example of strategic flattery,
Right.
using sweet talk to kind of manipulate the situation to their advantage.
Oh, they're sneaky little things. Now, for a juicier idiom, we have spill the beans. That satisfying moment when a secret is revealed. I love how the author uses the example of keeping her pregnancy a secret for the first few months. It's like that information was bubbling inside, just waiting to be spilled.
It perfectly captures that sudden release of information,
Right.
like beans tumbling out of a bag.
Right.
And once those beans are spilled, you can't put them back in.
So true. Speaking of taking things with a grain of salt,
Right.
that's our next idiom.
Okay.
It's a reminder to approach information with a healthy dose of skepticism. The author uses gardening advice as an example. Not all tips and tricks are created equal.
Right.
Sometimes you need to experiment and see what works for you.
It encourages critical thinking and, discernment judgment.
Yeah.
Don't just blindly accept everything you hear. Do your own research, consider different perspectives, and form your own conclusions.
Now let's spice things up a bit. It's about adding flavor and excitement and intrigue. The author contrasts this with just reporting the facts, suggesting that sometimes a little embellishment can make a story more engaging.
Of course, there's a fine line between adding spice and distorting the truth.
Right.
But in the context of storytelling, a little creative flair can go a long way.
Right. It's like the difference between reading a dry textbook and getting lost in a captivating novel. And lastly, for our food idioms, we have lose your touch.
Okay.
It's that disheartening feeling when you lose a skill or talent you once possessed.
The author uses the example of language proficiency. If you don't practice regularly, you might lose your touch and struggle to communicate as effectively as you once did.
Right. It's a reminder that even those skills we take for granted really need to be nurtured and maintained. Now let's shift gears and explore a category that's a bit closer to homebody idioms. These often tap into physical sensations and experiences to convey a deeper meaning.
They're a fascinating way to explore how language reflects our embodied experience of the world.
Right.
For example, rule of thumb refers to a general guideline, not a hard and fast rule.
And get this, the origin of the phrase might be related to an old law that allowed men to beat their wives with a stick no thicker than their thumb.
Wow. I had no idea.
Talk about a dark history.
It definitely adds a new layer of complexity to the idiom, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even seemingly innocuous phrases can have unsettling origins.
Right.
But focusing on its current usage, rule of thumb emphasizes practicality and approximation.
Okay, I'm all about those practical guidelines. Now, have you ever been in a situation where you barely escaped disaster, where you succeeded by the skin of your teeth?
It evokes that sense of narrow escape,
Yeah.
of just barely avoiding a negative outcome.
Right.
So imagine passing an exam by a single point. That's by the skin of your teeth.
Talk about a nail biter. Now, this next idiom is one that I try to practice regularly, get something off your chest. It's that feeling of relief that comes from talking about something that's been weighing you down. The author suggests offering this phrase to a friend who seems troubled, encouraging them to unburden themselves.
It speaks to the power of emotional release and the importance of sharing our burdens with trusted individuals.
Yeah.
Sometimes just, voicing those worries or anxieties can really lighten the load.
Oh, absolutely. Bottling things up never does anyone any good. Now, have you ever put your foot in your mouth? I think we've all been there at some point.
Oh, I've definitely had my fair share of awkward moments. It's that cringe-worthy feeling of saying something inappropriate, insensitive, or just plain embarrassing.
The author shares a funny story about asking her neighbor about her husband,
Uh-oh.
only to realize moments later that she was divorced.
Oh, I can feel the secondhand embarrassment.
Talk about a social faux pas.
But it happens to the best of us.
It does.
The key is to recover gracefully. Apologize if necessary, and try to laugh it off.
Bite the bullet is another idiom that captures that feeling of confronting something unpleasant head on. I always think of those tasks that we dread,
Yeah.
like calling the insurance company or having a difficult conversation with a coworker. But sometimes you just gotta grit your teeth and bite the bullet.
It's about accepting the inevitable and getting it over with.
Right.
It might be painful in the moment,
Yeah.
but the relief that comes afterward is worth it.
Right. And when things get out of hand, well, that's a whole different level of stress. It's like that feeling when a situation spirals out of control and you're just trying to regain some semblance of order.
The author paints a vivid picture of a classroom full of 3-year-olds to illustrate this point. I think any parent or teacher can relate to that feeling of chaos when things go from manageable to mayhem in the blink of an eye.
I can only imagine. Now, for an idiom that captures the struggle of understanding something complex, we have wrap your head around something.
Yeah.
The author admits she struggled to wrap her head around math problems in high school. Sometimes those abstract concepts just take a while to click.
It's that process of mentally grappling with a new idea,
Right.
trying to make sense of it,
Yeah.
and fitting it into your existing framework of knowledge. It might take time, effort, and maybe even a few head scratches.
Right.
But eventually, that aha moment arrives.
Speaking of clicking, Have you ever played something by ear? Meaning to proceed without a fixed plan, adapting as you go. It's a valuable skill in life, especially when things don't go according to plan.
It's about being flexible, resourceful, and responsive to the situation at hand. It's like being a jazz musician who improvises a solo,
Right.
relying on intuition and experience rather than a pre-written score.
And lastly, for our body idioms, we have a blessing in disguise.
Okay.
It's that moment when something that initially seemed negative turns out to have positive consequences.
The author connects this to the experience of lockdown during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
For many people, that forced period of isolation and disruption actually led to unexpected benefits,
Right.
like spending more time with family,
Yeah.
pursuing new hobbies,
Yeah.
or reevaluating priorities.
It's a reminder that perspective is everything. Sometimes those challenges we face can lead us to unexpected opportunities for growth and transformation.
It's about looking for those silver linings,
Right.
even when they're hidden beneath a cloud of adversity.
Yeah.
Sometimes those difficult experiences can push us in directions we never would have imagined, ultimately leading to a better outcome.
That's a great point. Okay, from blessings in disguise, let's move on to a topic that often causes a lot of stress: money. These money idioms are fascinating because they really reflect our anxieties and aspirations around wealth and success.
Money is such a loaded topic, both literally and figuratively. It's intertwined with our sense of security, status, even self-worth.
Right.
So it's no surprise that these idioms often carry a lot of emotional weight.
Yeah, the first one that jumps out at me is break the bank. It's such a dramatic way to describe something expensive. It's like whatever you're buying is going to wipe out your entire savings.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that we often use it in the negative. The author points out,
Oh?
learning English on YouTube doesn't break the bank. So it's kind of a playful way to emphasize affordability and accessibility.
It's a great point, like saying, hey, this is a valuable resource that anyone can access without going into debt. Now give someone a run for their money.
Right.
That takes us into a more competitive realm.
It implies a tough challenge, a close contest where someone really has to fight for their victory.
Right.
The author uses a sports analogy describing a soccer match where two teams are evenly matched,
Okay.
pushing each other to their limits. Even if you don't ultimately win, you've proven yourself to be a worthy opponent.
I love how idioms can bring these competitive scenarios to life. It's like you're right there on the field, feeling the intensity of the match.
Speaking of raising the stakes, we have up the ante, right? It's all about increasing what's expected, taking things to the next level. The author shares a fun example of a dinner party
Okay.
where one guest brings a simple salad, while another guest ups the ante by bringing homemade bread and a bottle of wine.
Talk about outdoing the competition. I can definitely see how that would up the ante for future dinner parties. Now let's move on to a more general category of action idioms, those expressions that focus on, well, taking action.
These idioms often reflect our values around work, effort, personal responsibility.
Yeah.
The first one on our list is cut someone some slack,
Right.
which is a plea for understanding and leniency.
Like saying, hey, we all make mistakes. Let's not be too quick to judge or criticize.
Exactly. We've all been in situations where we've needed someone to cut us some slack,
Oh, absolutely.
right? And
Yep.
then, of course, there are times when we need to draw the line.
Yeah. That's about setting boundaries, establishing what's acceptable and what's not. The author talks about parenting styles and how even the most permissive parents, usually draw the line at violence or harmful behavior.
It highlights those non-negotiables,
Right?
those core values that we're not willing to compromise on. It's about standing up for what we believe in and protecting ourselves and others from harm.
Now, for an idiom that encourages critical thinking and open-mindedness, we have play devil's advocate. It's not about being contrary or argumentative just for the sake of it. It's about challenging assumptions and exploring different perspectives.
Right. It's a valuable tool for intellectual discourse and problem solving. By deliberately taking an opposing viewpoint,
Yeah.
you can uncover weaknesses in your own arguments, identify potential pitfalls, and ultimately arrive at a more nuanced and informed conclusion.
It's like pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and considering perspectives that you might not initially agree with. It's about expanding your mental horizons and challenging your own biases. Now, have you ever had that experience where you hear something that sounds vaguely familiar, but you can't quite place it? That's what Rings a Bell is all about.
Oh, all the time. It's like, when you hear a song from your childhood and you've heard it before, but you can't remember the name of the song or the artist.
Yeah, so frustrating.
Yeah, it's that feeling of something being on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't quite grasp it.
Right, and then there are those individuals who go above and beyond, exceeding expectations in every way. They're the ones who go the extra mile.
The author shares this heartwarming anecdote about a neighbor who went the extra mile by cleaning up her trash after a raccoon attack. Yeah, it's that kind of selfless act of kindness that really makes a difference.
It's those little acts of generosity that make the world a brighter place. Now, when you're telling a story and you want to skip over the unnecessary details, you can make a long story short.
Right, it's a way of being concise and respecting your listener's time. It's about getting to the heart of the matter without getting bogged down in irrelevant details.
And finally, for our action idioms, we have jump on the bandwagon. This one's all about following the crowd, adopting a trend just because it's popular.
The author recalls a high school trend of dyeing hair blonde, which she chose not to participate in.
Oh.
But it speaks to that pressure to conform, especially during those formative teenage years, when fitting in can feel so important.
Yeah, it's about that desire to be part of the group, to feel like you belong. But of course, there's also a lot of value in being an individual and charting your own course.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between fitting in and staying true to yourself. Now let's wrap up our exploration of idioms with a kind of grab bag of miscellaneous expressions that are equally useful in everyday conversation.
This is like the everything else category, where we find those idioms that don't quite fit into the other Nate categories.
Exactly. But these idioms are just as important and just as colorful as the others.
The first one that catches my eye is on the ball, which describes someone who's alert, prepared, and ready to take action. The author humorously contrasts her professional life, where she's, always on the ball, with her more relaxed home life.
It highlights how we often present different versions of ourselves in different contexts.
Right.
In a professional setting, there's often an expectation of competence and efficiency. Whereas, at home, we can kind of let our guard down and be more relaxed and spontaneous.
Right. And then there's 247, which means all the time, constantly, without a break. It's like saying something never sleeps. It's always happening. The author points out that parents are often busy 204/7 juggling the demands of childcare, work, and household responsibilities.
It's a testament to the relentless nature of parenting.
Right.
It's a demanded job that requires constant attention and energy.
Speaking of demanding, easier said than done is an idiom that I think we can all relate to. It describes those tasks or goals that seem simple in theory but are actually quite challenging to execute.
Yeah. The author uses the example of practicing English daily, which is a great goal.
Yeah.
But finding the time and the motivation to do it consistently can be a struggle.
Right.
Life often throws curveballs, distractions pop up.
Yeah.
Our best intentions can fall by the wayside.
It's about recognizing that sometimes we need to give ourselves grace when we fall short of our own expectations. It's about acknowledging the complexities of life and not beating ourselves up when things don't go according to plan. Now, for an idiom that's both practical and forgiven, we have better late than never. It's that reassurance that it's okay to be delayed, as long as you eventually show up and make an effort.
It's about value and effort over punctuality. It's about recognizing that sometimes things happen beyond our control, and it's more important to show up and participate than to be perfectly on time.
It's a reminder that life is not a race, and it's okay to take your time and arrive at your own pace. And lastly, we have so far so good, which is a cautiously optimistic assessment of the current situation. It's like saying, things are going well at the moment, but let's not jinx it.
It's a recognition that things can change quickly.
Right.
But for now, we can kind of enjoy the moment and appreciate the positive aspects of our situation.
It's like a breath of fresh air, a moment of calm amidst the chaos of life. It's a reminder to savor those moments of peace and contentment, knowing that challenges may lie ahead, but for now, things are good.
Wow, that was quite a journey through the world of idioms. Who knew there were so many ways to spice things up or bring home the bacon with just a couple well-placed words?
It's amazing how these seemingly simple expressions can add so much depth and nuance to the language.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface, though.
Oh, absolutely. The beauty of language is that it's constantly evolving.
So even though we've, decoded 50 idioms today,
Right.
there are countless others out there just waiting to be discovered. And the meanings of these idioms can shift over time. reflecting cultural changes and new ways of thinking.
Right. It's a reminder that language learning is an ongoing process. It's not a destination.
Well said. It's about staying curious, paying attention to how language is used in different contexts, and embracing those moments when you encounter, like, a new expression.
So what can our listener do to keep developing their understanding of idioms?
Well, first and foremost, keep your ears open. Pay attention to how native speakers use idioms in everyday conversations, in movies, in music.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you hear an idiom that you don't understand, don't be shy about asking for clarification.
Yeah, most native speakers are happy to explain the meaning of an idiom, and they might even share a personal anecdote or two that'll help you remember it.
It's those stories and connections that really make idioms come alive.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to experiment with using idioms yourself.
I know it can be a bit intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
And even if you put your foot in your mouth occasionally,
Right.
it's all part of the learning process.
Exactly. Better to try and make a few mistakes than to avoid using idioms altogether.
So to our listener, embrace the challenge. Explore the world of idioms with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to experiment.
And remember, the journey of language learning is a lifelong adventure.
It's a journey filled with surprises, insights, and endless opportunities for growth.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep spicing up your language with those colorful and captivating idioms.
And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of American English idioms.
Until next time, happy language learning. Hey everyone, welcome back. You know, whether you are getting ready for a big meeting, or trying to learn some new English idioms, or just like really curious about how people talk today, we were going to deep dive into some of those expressions that we use all the time.
Yeah.
And we're going to be focusing on ones with animals and everyday scenarios, you know?
Right.
Like all those little sayings that just paint a picture in your head.
Yeah, it's amazing how these little phrases, idioms, can pack so much meaning. It's just a few words, right? They can be like these little windows into a culture's history or its humor, its values.
It's true. And so we've got this text here all about idioms and so many great examples. We wanted to kind of like pick it apart. And
Yeah, let's unpack them. Let's unpack some of these gems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with the animal idioms.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one, a little bird told me. I mean, everyone uses that one.
Yeah.
But have you ever really thought about like a tiny bird like coming up to you and whispering? It's just hilarious.
I know, it's kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, and it's this really cool way of like saying you've got some insider information without actually having to say who told you, right? It's like you're in the know, but you're keeping it a little mysterious too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so another animal one as the crow flies, which is basically just like a straight line distance. But, you know, our source was pointing out that, like, if you think about it, one-way streets really mess that up.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just be like,
totally.
I'm going as the crow flies in a city.
Right. You can't just like fly over all the buildings and through the traffic. It's, it's a nice idea, but it doesn't always work.
No, you got to follow the rules of the road.
Yeah.
Okay, so curiosity killed the cat. Good warning. Right. But the source was using it like in a funny way when they were talking about Christmas presents.
Oh, I see.
Trying to keep people from peeking.
You know, like those curious hands away from
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh.
It's like you want them to be excited, but you also want to keep the surprise.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of being speechless, cat got your tongue. I mean, that is such a classic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely classic for when someone's just completely speechless.
Yeah, like stunned into silence.
Right. Totally caught off guard.
I've definitely been there.
Oh, yeah. Haven't we all? Okay, this next one I thought was interesting. Barking up the wrong tree. So the source was talking about how it can be used when someone is like mistaken about someone's sexuality.
Okay.
And they even mentioned Ellen DeGeneres as an example.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so it's like you're making assumptions about someone and you're way off base.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and it's especially in sensitive situations, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Communication is so important.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just totally miss the mark.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, last one in our animal category. Packed like sardines.
Oh, yeah, you can't help but picture that.
Right.
Everyone crammed in
Yeah.
tight space.
I know. And the source even mentioned like how 2020 with all this social distancing was like the opposite of being packed like sardines.
Right. Like we were all spread out for once.
I know.
So it's funny how, like, what's happening in the world
Totally.
really does affect how we talk.
Yeah. Okay, so ready to move to the farm?
Let's do it. Bring on the farm idioms.
All right, so when pigs fly, the ultimate expression of
Right, the impossible.
impossibility.
Yeah.
And the source had a funny example about never giving up chocolate.
Oh, that's a good one because who would ever give up chocolate?
I know.
It's like an ultimate impossibility.
I know.
Right.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just good life advice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Whether you're applying for jobs or investing money or even just like planning your week,
Yeah,
it's all about spreading out the risk,
Right.
right? You don't want to put all your hopes and dreams into one thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to don't count your chickens before they hatch. I mean, that just goes hand in hand.
Right. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't assume everything's going to work out perfectly.
until it actually does.
Yeah, because you never know what can happen.
Oh, I learned that one the hard way.
Oh, really?
Eh.
Do you tell?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long story, but let's just say I was celebrating a little too early.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, and it all came crashing down.
It's a good reminder to stay humble, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't put the cart before the horse.
Oh, yeah. Another gem about timing and order.
Right?
Yeah, like the source mentioned, quitting your job before you have another one lined up.
Oh, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, big mistake. Yeah.
Okay, so straight from the horse's mouth, which means...
The most reliable source, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're getting it from the best possible source.
Yeah, and especially today with all the, like,
Right. Misinformation.
all the fake news and everything.
You really got it.
Be careful.
Yeah, consider the source. Yeah, absolutely fact check those sources.
Okay, so this next one, a needle in a haystack. The source had a great story about this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so their son dropped a needle in the grass.
Oh, no.
I know, and it took them, their husband, 2 neighbors, and the son an hour to find this needle.
Oh, my gosh, that's a nightmare.
I know.
Especially with a needle, you don't want to lose that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
So it really does,
Yeah.
capture
It
that.
really emphasizes how hard it is to find something so small
I know.
in such a big area.
Exactly, and it just like makes it so much more memorable.
Yeah, stories are powerful that way.
Yeah.
They bring language to life.
Totally. Okay, last one for this category. Hit the hay, which just means
Go to bed.
go to bed.
Yeah,
But you can't help but picture someone like diving into a pile of hay.
it's a funny image.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a much more entertaining way to say you're going to sleep.
All right, are you
Sounds-
ready for things to get a little weird? Because we're moving on to body parts.
Okay, let's do it. I'm intrigued. Yeah, let's see what we got.
I'm excited about this
Me
category.
too.
Okay.
All right. Body parts, I love it.
Okay, so first one right off the bat, break a leg.
Ooh, it's a good one.
I know it sounds so mean,
It does, right?
but it actually means good luck, especially like
Yeah.
in theater or,
In the performing arts, it's like this
Exactly.
weird superstition.
I know, and the source was even saying like
Right.
in theater saying good luck is sometimes considered
Bad luck.
bad luck, so you have to say break a leg.
You got to be careful with your words.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of things going wrong, pulling my leg.
Okay.
Okay, so the source had this hilarious story.
Oh, I love a good story.
And I have to share it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they live in an area with black bears.
Okay.
So picture this, right?
I'm picturing it.
They're at the store. They've got all these groceries.
Okay.
They're coming out to the parking lot
Uh-huh.
and they see a black bear.
Oh, no.
I know, right? And the bear starts chasing them.
Oh, my gosh.
Maybe at one of the groceries, who knows?
Bears love food,
I know.
especially berries.
Ew, right. So they're running.
Uh-huh.
The bear's chasing them
Okay.
and wait for it.
What happens next?
Okay, so this is the best part. This isn't even a true story, but they used to tell this joke all the time.
Oh, I see.
So the bear catches their shoe and
Okay.
starts pulling their leg.
Literally pulling their leg.
Literally pulling their leg. And they'd be like, just like I'm pulling yours.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh.
What a great way to use the idiom.
Right. Okay. Keep an eye out and keep your eyes peeled. I mean, they both mean to be watchful, right?
Yeah, they both mean to be watchful, but keep your eyes peeled feels a little more
Intense.
intense. Yeah, it's like you're really looking for something specific.
Yeah, like the source used it for like
Yeah.
watching out for snakes while you're hiking.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You want to be extra careful.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. See eye to eye which just means
To agree?
to agree.
Yeah, to be on the same page about something.
Yeah, and the source was talking about how it's so important, like,
Hmm.
in relationships to see eye to eye.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially when you're making big decisions together.
Totally.
Yeah, you got to be on the same team.
Okay, I think we've all experienced this next one. My eyes were bigger than my stomach.
Oh, yeah, all the time, especially at buffets.
I know, like you load up your plate and then you're like,
And then you're like, oh, I can't eat another bite.
I know, food coma.
Yeah, it's that classic overestimation of your own capacity.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, bite off more than you can chew. I mean,
that's a good one, too. It's like when you take on too much,
yeah.
you overcommit,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh, how am I going to do all of this?
Right, and the source even admitted to feeling this way about, like,
Really?
creating 2 new courses at once.
I can see. Yeah, that's a lot to handle,
I know.
especially if they're really different courses.
I know. Okay, so keep your chin up, which
Yeah.
is just like,
Classic encouragement, right?
yeah, like stay positive, stay strong.
Yeah. It's like a little reminder to keep going even when things are tough.
Yeah, okay, a chip on your shoulder. So this one's a little less
Literal.
yeah, it's like you're carrying around this
Resentment.
resentment, like you feel like you've been wronged.
Yeah, like someone did you wrong and you're still holding on to that.
Right, and the source used the example of like someone missing a game-winning shot because another player interfered.
Oh, yeah. You definitely have a chip on your shoulder after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, ready to try some figurative gymnastics?
Oh, I'm ready to bring it on.
All right, bend over backwards.
Okay, try to picture that literally bend over backward.
I know, it's hilarious, but it actually means to like,
Go above and beyond?
yeah, make a big effort.
Yeah, you're really trying hard to do something.
Right. And like the source was saying, car salespeople trying to make sales in a tough economy.
Oh, yeah. They're really working hard to make those deals.
I know. Okay, so we have 2 that are about like making a bad situation worse.
Ooh. Okay, let's hear them.
Okay, so add insult to injury
Okay.
and rub salt in the wound.
Ouch, those sound painful.
I know,
Yeah,
but they're so descriptive.
they are. Yeah, like add insult to injury. It's like
Yeah.
you're already down and then something else bad happens.
Yeah, like this source said, like locking your keys in the car and then realizing your phone's dead.
Oh, that's the worst.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy.
Right, and rub salt in the wound. That image is just
Brutal.
brutal. I know, and the source said, like,
Yeah.
seeing a friend's happy family photos when you're having a rough day with your kids.
Oh, yeah, I can see that that would sting a little bit.
Yeah, like rubbing salt right in that wound.
Exactly.
Okay, last one for this category, go behind someone's back,
Yeah.
which is all about,
Secrecy and betrayal.
yeah,
Well,
like
yeah.
the example the source gave was like a teenager sneaking out to go on a date after being told no.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic example of going behind someone's back.
I know, and it's, like you said, a total,
Breach of trust.
yeah. Okay, ready to shift gears a bit.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready for a new category.
Okay, so we're moving on to idioms about work and productivity.
Okay, that's a good one. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, I know, I definitely need to hear these.
Me too. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so we've covered animals, body parts, even the farm. Like, what other categories of idioms could there possibly be?
We'll get ready for some delicious expressions because next up we have food idioms.
Food. Ooh, lay it on me. I love food.
Okay, so how about this one? Spill the beans.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic one. Like you're letting a secret out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those beans bursting out of the bag and you can't put them back in.
It's true. And sometimes you don't even mean to do it. Like you accidentally reveal a surprise party.
Oh, yeah, or you let slip a piece of gossip that you weren't supposed to share.
Exactly. Okay, so this next one makes me hungry, a piece of cake.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It means something is super easy.
Yeah, like it's a breeze. It's no problem at all.
Exactly. And it's so much more fun to say than just, it's easy.
I know everyone loves cake.
Okay, so speaking of cake, how about have your cake and eat it too?
Oh, yeah, that one's about wanting it all.
Yeah, it's like wanting to enjoy all the benefits without any of the downsides.
It's like wanting to eat the whole cake without gaining weight.
Exactly. Or wanting to spend all your money but still have savings in the bank.
Right, it's that human desire for the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but unfortunately it doesn't always work that way.
Okay, this next one sounds a little more intense. Bite the bullet.
It does. Yeah, I mean, it means to face something difficult head on, even if it's unpleasant.
Yeah, it's like bracing yourself for something painful.
Right, like, you have to do it. So you just take a deep breath and go for it.
I've definitely had to bite the bullet a few times in my life.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so when something is super obvious, we say it's clear as crystal.
Oh, yeah, like you can see right through it.
Exactly. No confusion whatsoever.
Okay, so look before you leap is a classic piece of advice.
Yeah, don't just jump into something without thinking it through.
Right, take a moment to consider the consequences.
Exactly. It's better to be safe than sorry.
As easy as ABC. I mean, that one makes me think of like learning the alphabet as a kid.
Right, it's like saying something is so simple, even a child could do it.
Okay, this next one sounds like a call for honesty. Call a spade a spade.
Yeah, it means to be straightforward and tell it like it is.
Even if it's not what people want to hear.
Exactly. It's about being truthful, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
It's like cutting through all the BS and getting to the point.
Right, because sometimes you just need to hear the truth, plain and simple.
Okay, this next one sounds like my mom talking to me when I was a teenager. Get your act together.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one a few times myself. It means to get organized and take responsibility.
Yeah, like stop messing around and get serious.
Exactly. It's a reminder that you have the power to change and improve.
It's true. Okay, so the source also included some classic idioms that offer words of wisdom.
Oh, I love those. They were like little life lessons packed into a few words.
Okay, so better late than never.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good one.
It is, yeah, it's a reminder that it's never too late to do something you want to do.
Right, like even if you missed an opportunity or you procrastinated, you can still make progress.
Exactly. It's about embracing second chances.
Okay, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Another classic.
Yeah, it's about breaking the cycle of negativity.
So, like, if someone does something bad to you, you shouldn't do something bad back to them.
Exactly. It's about choosing forgiveness and understanding.
Okay, and finally, one of my all-time favorites, practice makes perfect.
Oh, yes. So simple, yet so powerful.
It's true. If you want to get good at something, you have to keep practicing.
Exactly. And it's not just about reaching perfection. It's about enjoying the journey of learning and improvement.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've learned so much today.
Me too. It's amazing how much we can learn from these simple expressions.
They really do provide a glimpse into our culture and our values.
Absolutely. And they make language so much more colorful and interesting.
So to all of our listeners out there, keep your ears peeled for these idioms in everyday conversation.
And don't be afraid to try using them yourself. You might be surprised at how much fun it is.
It's like adding a little spice to your language.
Exactly. So, until next time, happy idiom hunting.
And we'll see you on our next deep dive.
All right, let's dive right in to the wild world of phrasal verbs. Those tricky combinations of verbs and prepositions that can make English sound so English.
Yeah, it's like they sprinkle a little bit of magic, a bit of mischief into how we talk.
Exactly. So we've got this great source material to guide us. And get this, it uses examples like, oh gosh, dealing with terrible singers and even rattlesnakes.
Sounds adventurous. Those are definitely situations where you'd need some expressive language.
Right. So let's make sure our listeners come out of this deep dive sounding like true native speakers. Where should we begin?
Maybe by looking at how these phrasal verbs actually work in sentences.
I think that's a great starting point.
Huh.
We could group them by like how they function. Like first we've got verbs for starting something, then ones for stopping, then ones for continuing an action, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's jump right in. Okay, so our source material kicks things off with a wedding. And not just any wedding, a wedding gone wrong.
Oh no, what happened? Well, apparently someone got cold feet and decided to call off the whole thing at the last minute.
Wow, talk about a dramatic start to a marriage.
Right, and that's a perfect example of how that little preposition off can completely change the meaning of a verb. It's not just calling someone, it's like canceling the whole event.
Exactly. And speaking of weddings, elope is another one that definitely implies a sudden, almost secretive start.
Ooh, yeah. It's like, packing your bags and running off to get hitched without all the fuss of a big ceremony.
Exactly. It's like hitting fast forward on the whole relationship.
That's a great way to put it. But, even when things start off smoothly, sometimes you just need to calm down.
Yeah, especially if you're stuck listening to a terrible singer.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like imagine you're at a karaoke night and someone decides to belt out a really, really bad rendition of their favorite song.
You'd need all the calming techniques in the world. Deep breaths, maybe a calming cup of tea, or just quietly slipping out the back door.
Yeah, whatever it takes. So calm down is all about like regaining your composure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Finding that inner peace amidst the chaos.
I like that. Now, what about catch up? That one seems like it could have a few different meanings.
You're right. Catch up can be about like reconnecting with someone after a long time, Hey, let's grab coffee and catch up.
Yeah, or it could be about getting back on track with something like, oh man, I've got so much work to catch up on after that vacation.
Right. It's like life is always throwing things at us and we're constantly trying to catch up.
I feel that. And sometimes when you're trying to catch up, you need to chip in and get some help.
True. Chip in is all about contributing like pitching in for a group gift or helping out with a project.
Yeah, it's that sense of teamwork and collaboration.
And our source actually has this heartwarming story about a kid who helps out with the gardening. So chip in isn't always about money, it can be about time and effort too.
Ah, that's sweet. But okay, enough about heartwarming stories. Let's get real. What about when things just, well, don't work out and you have to close down?
That's a tough one. Close down means like shutting things down for good. It's like closing a business or, ending a chapter in your life.
Yeah, it's not a fun topic, but it's definitely something we all experience at some point.
True. And sometimes it's even related to health. When you start feeling sick and you're like, uh-oh, I think I'm coming down with something.
Oh, no, I hate that feeling. It's like a mystery illness unfolding, and you're just waiting to see what hits you.
Exactly. It's that initial stage of feeling unwell, but you don't quite know what it is yet.
Okay, let's switch gears to something more positive. What about when we're brainstorming or trying to solve a problem? That's where come up with comes in, right?
Absolutely. It's that spark of inspiration, that aha moment. Think of inventors, writers, they're always coming up with new ideas.
It's like a mental light bulb going off.
Yeah, exactly. But even with the best ideas, sometimes we have to make adjustments. Like we might have to cut back on something we enjoy.
I know that feeling all too well, especially when it comes to like spending or eating sweets or, maybe even screen time.
It's about making conscious choices to find that balance in life.
Yeah, like hitting the brakes a little.
And speaking of brakes, cutoff takes on a whole new meaning when we're talking about driving.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started on those people who cut you off in traffic. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like they just appear out of nowhere and swerve right in front of you.
Exactly. And you know what? Sometimes it happens in conversations, too. Like someone just interrupts you mid-sentence.
Oh, yeah. That's the worst. It's like they just slam the door on your train of thought.
But it's not so bad. When someone just drops by for a visit.
Oh, yeah. Those unexpected visits can be really nice, especially when it's someone you haven't seen in a while.
It's like a spontaneous dose of social interaction.
But, life is full of twists and turns, and sometimes we end up in places we didn't expect.
That's true. Like you might end up at a different restaurant than planned, or even end up with a totally different career than you imagined.
It's like life has its own GPS, and sometimes it takes us on a detour.
And along those detours, we often have to figure out things as we go.
Exactly. Problem-solving skills are essential in life. It's like solving a puzzle. You keep trying different things until the pieces fall into place.
I love that analogy. It's like unlocking a secret level in a video game. But sometimes you need a little help along the way, especially if you've missed some key information.
Right. That's when you ask someone to fill you in on what happened. Like, hey, can you fill me in on what I missed at the meeting?
Yeah, it's like getting a recap of the highlights.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of filling things in, what about those dreaded forms we have to fill out all the time?
Paperwork, the bane of our existence. But yeah, fill out is the verb for that. Applications, questionnaires, all those annoying blanks to fill in.
It's like a written version of fill me in. Okay, but let's move on to something more exciting, discovering things.
Yes. There's nothing quite like the thrill of finding out something new, something unexpected.
It's like those oh wow moments that expand your knowledge.
It's like finding a hidden treasure.
Speaking of treasures, relationships are some of the most valuable ones we have. And getting along with people is crucial for maintaining those connections.
Absolutely. It's about having that harmony, that mutual understanding.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot where everyone feels respected and comfortable.
And that brings us to, well, let's be honest, procrastination. We all have those tasks we keep getting around to eventually.
Yeah, eventually being the key word there. It's like that never-ending to-do list that just keeps growing.
It's the art of delaying.
And sometimes that delay can lead to, well, revenge. Like when you get back at someone for something they did.
Oh, yeah, like a playful prank or a little harmless retaliation.
It's all fun and games until someone takes it too far. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you just have to give up.
Give up can be tough, especially for those of us who are determined and goal-oriented.
Right. But our source makes a great point: never give up on learning, especially when it comes to tricky things like phrasal verbs.
Exactly. Keep pushing yourself, keep practicing, and you'll get there.
I love that. Okay, but what about grow up? That one can be a bit loaded.
Yeah, it's often about, maturity, taking on responsibility, but sometimes it's just a playful way of teasing someone who's acting a little childish.
Right, like, come on, get it together. But sometimes even as adults, we just need to hang on for a moment and take a breather.
True. Hang on can be literal, like holding on to something for dear life, or it can be more metaphorical, like enduring a tough situation.
Yeah, like weathering the storm.
And speaking of weathering the storm, sometimes we just need to hang out with friends and forget about our troubles for a while.
Absolutely. It's like hitting the pause button on life's craziness.
No agenda, no stress, just pure fun and connection.
Love it. But okay, enough about fun. Back to reality. Sometimes we have to hold on to hope, especially when things are tough.
That's a powerful one. It's about resilience, that inner strength to keep going.
And speaking of holding on, our source mentions that classic Sam and David song, Hold On. Remember that one?
Oh yeah, what a great example of how phrasal verbs can convey such strong emotions in music.
And speaking of keeping things going, what about Keep On?
Keep on is all about persistence, about staying the course even when it gets tough.
It's that never give up attitude.
Exactly. And sometimes we need that reminder to just keep on, keep it on, keep pushing forward, keep striving for our goals.
So true. Okay, let's switch gears to anticipation. What's the phrasal verb for that feeling of excitement for something coming up?
Look forward to. It captures that eager anticipation perfectly. Like, I'm really looking forward to that vacation.
It's like counting down the days.
And there's some things we don't look forward to, but hey, at least we can always look forward to the simple pleasures in life.
Like a good cup of coffee or a sunny day.
Absolutely. It's about finding joy in the everyday moments. But speaking of everyday moments, sometimes we have to be careful and look out for danger.
Oh yeah, look out is a classic warning. Like, look out for cars. Or look out for snakes.
It's about being aware of our surroundings and staying safe.
It's like having an extra set of eyes, constantly scanning for potential threats. But okay, let's move on to something a bit more peaceful, like learning. Look up is all about searching for information, right?
Exactly. It's about satisfying that curiosity and expanding your knowledge. Like, I need to look up that word in the dictionary.
Yeah, like opening a window to a whole new world of information. Okay, last one for this section. Let's talk about driving again. Pull over is a common one, but it can mean different things, right?
Yeah, it can be voluntary, like pulling over to enjoy a scenic view, or it can be an instruction, like when a police officer tells you to pull over.
And speaking of police officers, get pulled over is definitely an experience we all hope to avoid.
Yeah, it's not exactly a fun time. But you know what is a fun time? Procrastinating. And the phrasal verb for that is put off.
Put off is like the ultimate delay tactic. It's like, I'll do it later, maybe?
The master of procrastination.
But sometimes you just have to put up with things you don't enjoy, like a noisy neighbor or a long commute.
Yeah, it's about tolerance, about dealing with those less than ideal situations.
It's like gritting your teeth and bearing it.
Exactly. So what do you think? We've covered a lot of ground here, from weddings to driving to procrastination and everything in between. What stands out to you about these phrasal verbs?
Well, I'm really struck by how much they add to the flavor of the English language. They're so informal and expressive. It's like they inject personality into our conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And they're everywhere. You hear them in casual chats, on TV, even in formal settings sometimes. They're like the secret sauce that makes English sound so English.
Exactly. Phrasal verbs truly are the spice of life, at least when it comes to speaking English.
It's like they give you that extra layer of, emotional depth, like you can really get your point across.
Yeah. It's like, you're not just saying the words, you're adding that extra oomph.
And for someone learning English, mastering phrasal verbs, that's like a golden ticket.
Right. It's like you're finally in on all the secrets.
Exactly. But even for us native speakers, there are some tricky ones,
Yeah, for sure. Like, sometimes you get thrown off by those phrasal verbs with a million different meanings.
Or you hear someone use a phrasal verb and you're like, wait, what? Is that even a real thing? Especially with all those regional dialects.
Right. Like, it's a constant learning process, even for us.
It really is. Language is always evolving, which makes it so fascinating.
Okay, so let's keep this evolution going. We've got a ton more phrasal verbs to cover. Where should we go next?
How about we explore some phrasal verbs that deal with searching or discovering something?
Ooh, I like that. We already talked about look up and find out, but I'm sure there are tons more out there.
Oh, there are. Like, what about seek out? That implies a more deliberate, proactive search,
Interesting. So it's not just about stumbling upon something, it's like actively going after it.
Exactly. Like, I'm seeking out a specialist for this condition, or I'm seeking out a rare first edition of this book.
Ooh, yeah, it's like you're on a mission. And what about when you're like trying to find something that's lost?
For that, you might use hunt down or even ferret out.
Okay, so hunt down is like you're determined to find it no matter what.
Right. And ferret out implies that it's hidden, maybe even a bit secretive.
I like that. It's like you're a detective putting all the pieces together.
Exactly. And the clues, they lead to, well, hopefully they lead to the phrasal verb treasure.
I love it. Okay, so we've searched, we've discovered. What's next on our phrasal verb adventure?
How about those tricky phrasal verbs that deal with, making decisions or choices?
Ooh, that's a good one. I can already think of a few, like opt for and rule out.
Those are perfect examples. Opt for means you're choosing something specific, while rule out means you're eliminating options.
It's like narrowing down the possibilities until you're left with the winner.
And sometimes making a decision involves really weighing the pros and cons, right? Like you really need to think things through.
Yeah, that's where think over or mull over come in.
It's a careful consideration, not rushing into anything.
It's like taking your time, really pondering all the angles.
And sometimes you need a second opinion. You got to talk it out with someone.
Right. That's when talk over or hash out come into play.
It's that collaborative approach, like two heads are better than one.
Exactly. So many decisions, so many phrasal verbs. It's amazing how much nuance they add.
Yeah, it really is. And sometimes those nuances can get pretty emotional.
Ooh, that's a good point. We haven't really touched on those yet. Like, what about phrasal verbs that deal with, sadness or loss?
Well, one that immediately comes to mind is pass away. It's a gentler way of saying someone has died.
Yeah, it softens the blow a little.
Right. And then there's breakdown, which can be used for both people and things,
So it's like, for a person, it's an emotional breakdown. And for a thing, it's like, it stops working.
Exactly. And when you're going through something tough, sometimes you just need to lean on someone.
Lean on is such a beautiful way to express that need for support, Like you're not alone, you've got someone to help you through it.
It's about that vulnerability and trust.
And sometimes you have to be the one to reach out for help.
Yes. Taking that first step, making that connection.
It can be scary, but it's so important.
It really is. And speaking of moving forward, sometimes you have to let go of the past.
Let go is about releasing those negative emotions, those things that are holding you back.
Exactly. It's about healing and moving on.
Like closing one chapter and starting a fresh new one.
And sometimes that new chapter involves forgiveness, like making up with someone or patching things up.
It's like mending a broken heart,
It's about rebuilding and finding that common ground.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about sadness, loss, forgiveness. What about those times when you need to, stand up for yourself or for what you believe in?
Well, for that, you might use stand up for or speak out against.
Those are powerful ones. It's about using your voice, making a difference.
And sometimes that involves taking a risk, stepping outside your comfort zone.
Right. That's where branch out or venture out come in.
It's about exploring new possibilities, pushing your boundaries.
Like going on an adventure. You never know what you might discover.
And speaking of discoveries, sometimes you have to take a step back and reflect,
Yeah, look back on it or think back on those past experiences, good and bad.
It's like flipping through a photo album of your life.
So many memories, so many lessons learned.
And hopefully some accomplishments to celebrate.
Yes, give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Or, as the phrasal verb goes, give yourself credit.
It's important to acknowledge your achievements.
And to be grateful for all the good things in life, big and small.
Right. Count your blessings. Thank your lucky stars.
It's all about that positive perspective.
And sometimes that gratitude leads to wanting to give back, to pay it forward.
Yeah, it's like you've been blessed, now it's time to bless others.
It's about making a difference in the world however you can.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of emotional ground here, from sadness to gratitude to taking action. It's amazing how phrasal verbs can capture all of that.
They really can. It's like they add that extra layer of meaning, that human touch.
And what I'm really realizing is that even though phrasal verbs can be tricky, they're also incredibly fun.
Oh, absolutely. They add a playful energy to the language.
Just like a game, trying to figure out all the different combinations and meanings.
And the more you play, the better you get at it.
Exactly. Practice makes perfect, especially when it comes to phrasal verbs.
So true. So, to all our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep experimenting, and don't be afraid to have a little fun with these phrasal verbs.
I know. It's crazy how, like, two little words can pack so much punch.
Yeah, it's like they've got this hidden superpower.
Totally. And I gotta say, after this deep dive, I'm feeling way more confident about actually using them. Like, before I was kind of intimidated, you know?
I get it. They can seem overwhelming at first.
Yeah, but now I'm like, bring on the phrasal verbs. I'm ready to play.
That's the spirit. It's like once you crack the code, you can have so much fun with them.
And it's not just about memorizing a bunch of definitions either. It's like understanding the vibe, you know? Like when to use one phrasal verb versus another.
It's all about those subtle shades of meaning.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you become this phrasal verb master.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm already catching myself using them more in my everyday conversations.
That's awesome. See, it's like once you start paying attention, you realize they're everywhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, let's say someone's just starting out on their phrasal verb journey. What advice would you give them?
Good question. I'd say start small, you know? Pick a few common ones and just try to use them naturally. Don't try to learn everything at once.
Yeah, don't overwhelm yourself.
And you know what? Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh yeah, for sure. We all mess up sometimes, even native speakers.
Exactly. It's all part of the process.
And you know, sometimes those mistakes can even be funny.
Totally. It's all about having fun with language.
Exactly. Embrace the challenge, embrace the mistakes, and who knows, maybe you'll even invent a new phrasal verb along the way.
Now that would be impressive. Okay, so before we wrap things up, what's like one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about phrasal verbs?
That's a tough one. They're so important.
Yeah, they're like essential for sounding truly fluent and natural.
Right. Like if you want to blend in and sound like a native speaker, you got to master those phrasal verbs.
They're the secret weapon.
Well said. So there you have it, folks, our deep dive into the wonderful worlds of phrasal verbs.
It's been a wild ride.
And to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep having fun with English.
Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to explore these English phrasal verbs and also some common conversation questions.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think so too. And, you know, we've got all your notes and even a video this time, so we've got lots to work with.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the video. And you know what I find interesting is how these two things, phrasal verbs and these conversation questions, are really kind of connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not just about knowing the words themselves, but it's about using those words in a way that makes you sound like a more natural speaker.
Right.
So that you can, you know, go into those everyday conversations with more confidence.
Yeah, it's true. And I can see how mastering phrasal verbs, like, you know, some of the ones on this list, like turn down, could be really helpful. You know, I mean, that can help you handle those tricky situations, like when you have to refuse something politely, or maybe like even a marriage proposal.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Because turn down can be both literal, like turning down the volume on something,
Right.
but it can also be figurative, like when you're refusing something, like you said, a marriage proposal.
Yeah.
And, you know, you pointed out that the context really matters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely more serious if you're turning down a person as opposed to just like a second slice of cake.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, how can we use this whole, you know, literal versus figurative thing to help us really master these phrasal verbs?
Okay.
I mean, it's probably more than just memorizing a definition, right?
Yeah, it's totally more than just memorizing the definition. You really have to understand the essence of the verb, like what action or what idea is it trying to convey.
Okay.
And if we look at warm-up too, the video used this really nice visual of a cat slowly starting to accept you. Right?
Yeah, I loved that. So it's not like love at first sight. It's more of a gradual, like, coming around to something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the word warm is a really good word to analyze here
Oh.
because it implies like a temperature change, like a shift from like cold to hot. So when you say warming up to something, that suggests like a change in feeling that happens over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like maybe you start out, you know, skeptical, and then you kind of slowly start to see the potential, maybe even the fun.
Right. And if we think about it, like that idea of gradual change, we see that in so many different areas of life. It could be trying a new food. It could be getting used to a new job, even building a friendship.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes it takes time to warm up to something.
Okay, so this isn't just like vocabulary. We're learning about like human behavior and how we process our experiences.
I know.
This is deep stuff.
It is, and that's the beauty of language. It's not just about the words. It's like a reflection of the way that we think and feel and interact with, everything around us.
I love that. Okay, so there's another phrasal verb on the list that really stood out to me, and that is work something out. Oh my gosh, my parents used to say that all the time, especially when, me and my siblings were arguing.
Oh yeah, it's like a classic parenting phrase.
It is.
And, there's a reason why it works so well. If you think about it, like when you say work something out, it doesn't tell you what the solution is.
Right.
It really emphasizes that process of finding a compromise.
Yeah, that's true. It's almost like they're saying, we trust you to, like, figure this out on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, as a kid, sometimes you need that, you need that space to just figure out the conflict yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about empowering those people who are involved in the situation to find a solution that's going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
But work something out can go beyond, just ending an argument.
Right.
It applies to any situation where you're trying to find a solution, whether it's a project at work or it's a disagreement with a friend.
So it's a very versatile phrase with a message of collaboration, problem solving.
Yeah.
And it definitely sounds a lot more natural than saying something like, let's find a solution.
Exactly.
Especially if you're just having a casual conversation.
Right. And that's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
Fluency is not just about being grammatically correct. It's about using the language that feels authentic.
Right.
And that kind of reflects how native speakers actually communicate.
Right.
And so that brings us to the second part of our deep dive, which are those common conversation questions that you wanted to explore.
Yes. I have to say, I was really impressed with how the video organized them thematically. It had greetings, then it had, like weather, and then it had weekends.
Yeah, it made it so much easier to kind of digest everything.
Yeah, it was less intimidating for sure.
It's a really brilliant approach.
Yeah.
It's like they've given you a mental toolkit that you can use for all these different social situations. You're not just memorizing phrases, you're actually learning how to select the right phrases for specific context.
Right. So, like, something that might be appropriate if you're making small talk with your coworker might be different than if you're catching up with, like, a close friend.
Exactly.
The words might be similar, but the vibe is totally different.
Exactly. And, it's in those subtle nuances
Yeah.
that things can get tricky, especially for language learners.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about the grammar, it's about understanding those unspoken rules of the conversation.
Okay, so can you give me an example of one of those unspoken rules?
Yeah.
Like something from the video that really stood out to you.
Okay, so let's start with something as simple as the question, how's it going?
Okay.
Seems like a pretty basic greeting,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the video makes a really important point about responding with "and you."
Yeah.
It's a small thing,
Yeah.
but it makes a really big difference.
Yeah, it kind of turns that one-sided question into like a true exchange.
Exactly.
And you're acknowledging the other person, showing interest, and it kind of keeps that conversation flowing.
Precisely. And it's these little things
Yeah.
that signal that you are a confident communicator and that you're engaged. I mean, imagine if somebody just said good and then just stopped there.
Yeah.
It would feel very abrupt
Right.
and almost kind of rude, don't you think?
Totally. I'm really starting to see how much thought goes into these even simple exchanges.
Right.
It's like there's this hidden script that
Yeah.
we're all following, like, without even realizing it.
There is. And sometimes those unspoken rules, that's where things can get really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially when you start to think about all the different cultural differences
Right.
that influence how we communicate.
Okay. Now you got me curious. Can you give me an example of a question where culture plays a role? Like something that might trip up someone who is not a native speaker.
Okay, let's look at a classic example about the weather. Crazy weather we're having, huh?
Okay.
And the video pointed out that little at the end,
Yeah.
it's looking for agreement. Even if, like, secretly you hate the wind and the rain.
Oh.
You're supposed to agree.
Yeah. So it's not really about the weather.
Right.
It's more about finding that common ground and connecting with the person.
Exactly.
But what if you, like, honestly disagree?
Okay,
Do you just, like, pretend to love the heat wave just to be polite?
that's a really good question. And the video suggests that you can acknowledge the weather without specifically saying that you agree with it.
Yeah.
So you could say something like, yeah, it's been so humid lately.
Right.
So you're still participating in the conversation
Yeah.
without, compromising your true feelings.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding that balance between honesty and politeness.
Right.
And I bet that applies to a lot of other conversation scenarios too.
It does.
It's not always about just saying what's on your mind.
Yeah.
It's about saying it in a way that's appropriate for the context.
Precisely. And that's where mastering these phrases and understanding the cultural context can really help you.
Right.
Really help you shine in conversations. It's about reading between the lines.
Right.
Picking up on those cues.
Yeah.
And then responding in a way that just feels very natural and authentic.
This is fascinating. I'm starting to see conversation as less about exchanging information and more about building connections and navigating those social dynamics.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's why phrasal verbs and these conversation questions are so important.
Yeah.
They are the tools that help us to express ourselves, a little more subtly to kind of build that rapport and to really connect with the people that we're talking to.
Okay, I am definitely feeling inspired to really level up my conversation game. But before we jump into more of those questions, I am curious to hear your take on some of the other phrasal verbs that use the word run.
Oh, yeah.
Because they seem so simple, But I bet there's more to them than meets the eye, right?
You are absolutely right. Those run verbs are such a good example of how phrasal verbs can be both literal and figurative.
Yeah.
And, once you understand that meaning, it really unlocks a whole new level of fluency.
Okay.
So let's dive into those next.
Okay, so you want to talk run verbs.
Yeah. The video had a bunch of them.
They're everywhere in English. And they can be tricky, because the meaning changes depending on what you're talking about. But once you get that core concept, they get a lot easier.
I'm ready. Unlock the secrets of run. The video, they mentioned run away, and it wasn't just about physically running in the opposite direction. They had that funny example with the dog who was too lazy to run away because he knew where the food was.
That's a great example. It shows how runaway, it's not just about moving your body, right?
Right.
It suggests a motivation. You want to escape something that's not good. So the kid running away from home,
Yeah.
it's not that they're going for a jog.
Right. They want something else. Yeah, they want something better. Maybe it's just the cookies at the neighbor's house.
Cookies are always a good motivator.
Right.
But you're right, there's that idea of wanting something better or choosing a different path.
Yeah.
And so that can apply to more than just physically escaping, right?
Yeah.
What about running away from a problem or a responsibility you don't want to do? It's not literally running, but it's that same feeling.
Exactly. We use run away metaphorically all the time. You can run away from your feelings. You
Yeah.
can run away from a tough decision you got to make.
Right.
It's not about the distance.
Yeah.
It's that you want to avoid something hard.
So runaway has this double meaning, the actual running and that deeper meaning of avoiding stuff.
Exactly. That's what makes these phrasal verbs so cool.
Yeah.
You make the language deeper
Yeah.
so we can express more complicated ideas.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. What about run into?
Oh, good one.
Because the video, they talked about meeting someone you didn't expect to.
Yeah, like that awkward moment you see your teacher at the store.
Exactly.
So run into is super useful. You'll hear it all the time.
Okay.
Again, it's not about actually bumping into someone.
Right.
It's about that unexpected part. We use run to show the surprise.
It's true. You're just doing your thing and bam, there they are.
Right. Sometimes it's a good surprise. Sometimes it's uh-oh, got to make small talk.
Totally. But the cool thing is you can use it to tell a story.
Oh, yeah.
You'll never guess who I ran into.
Exactly. It makes people curious. They want to hear more.
Whoa, it's like a little hook to get people interested.
Exactly. Phrasal verbs, they make our language more fun and lively.
Okay, adding run into to my list.
Yeah.
What about run out of?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Classic. No milk. Gotta go to the store.
Exactly. But the video said you can often just say run out if it's clear what you mean.
Right, right.
So instead of we ran out of milk,
Yeah.
you could just be like, we ran out yesterday.
Yeah.
And people get it.
It's like a shortcut. It sounds more natural.
Exactly. You're not reading from a textbook,
Yeah, less robot-y.
Okay, now there's one that's really key for you. Stick with.
Okay.
The example was trying lots of instruments, but then sticking with drums. Why do you think they chose that example?
Well, learning music, it takes time.
Mm.
You gotta put in effort. It's not like instant. You gotta keep going even when it's hard.
Yeah.
So sticking with it, it shows that commitment. You're not giving up.
You got it.
Yeah.
Stick with isn't just doing something. It's about those challenges,
Yeah.
pushing through them. And it's not just hobbies. It's relationships, goals, anything that takes time.
That's so true. Like the video talked about friends sticking with each other through good times, A&D, bad.
Right. It's not just the fun stuff. It's loyalty, being there for each other.
So stick with has this idea of not giving up, being loyal, staying committed.
Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like a life lesson in a phrasal verb.
Exactly. Phrasal verbs, they often have these deeper meanings about our values.
They're like little nuggets of wisdom hiding in the language.
I like that.
Okay, I'm sold on phrasal verbs. What else did we find in the video?
Well, remember, turn down. We talk about saying no politely.
Yeah.
But what if you're turning down a person? The video, they use the example of someone proposing and getting rejected.
Ouch. Yeah, that's gotta hurt.
Right.
Turning down cake is one thing,
Way different.
but a person, that's like way more personal.
Right. And the video, it points that out. Saying she turned me down. It has this sadness to it.
Yeah.
This feeling of rejection.
Right.
It's deeper than just saying she said no.
So it's not just the action, it's the emotion behind it.
Exactly.
Like turn down, it becomes heavier when it's about people's feelings.
Right. And sometimes you need that strong feeling. Like if you're truly heartbroken, turned down gets that across better than just no.
That makes sense. Phrasal verbs can be so subtle.
They are. It's like they let us talk about those complex emotions that are hard to put into one word.
Okay, I'm feeling more and more confident with these, but there's one more that's stuck in my head. Think over.
Oh, yeah.
The video used the example of like buying a car, a big purchase.
Right. You got to think it over carefully.
Yeah, exactly.
Think over. It means to really consider something, the good and the bad, before you decide. It's like being careful, not rushing into things.
And it's not like they're telling you what to do. It's just encouraging you to be thoughtful.
Right.
Like, hey,
Right.
take your time. Think about it from all sides.
Now, you're respecting the person's choice, but you're also saying it's a big deal.
Okay, think it over is going on my list of phrases to use.
Good one.
But for now, maybe we should switch gears. Those conversation questions from the video, especially the travel ones, they were like a mini survival guide.
They were. For airports, hotels, even getting lost.
Exactly.
Those travel phrases are so helpful for real trips.
Okay, let's explore. All right, let's get this travel talk started. I gotta say, that travel section in the video, it was spot on.
It was. Like they knew exactly what can go wrong on a trip and gave you the words to fix it.
Right, like a cheat sheet for travelers. From planning the whole thing to not getting lost in a new city.
Exactly. And what I liked, they focused on stuff you'd actually say.
Yeah, not just fancy words from a textbook that nobody uses.
So right at the start, the planning, they had that basic question, where would you like to go?
Simple, but so important. It's what gets the whole travel conversation going.
And I love how they suggested answers like, I've never been to.
Yeah.
Because then you can talk about dream trips, give each other tips, discover places you'd never even heard of.
It's like opening a door to like a million adventures, but what about once you're there? Those phrases for getting around, that was super helpful for me.
Oh, I get it. Getting lost in a new country, that's stressful.
Big time. Especially if you don't speak the language well enough to ask for directions.
Right. That's why those basics are so key. Like, excuse me, can you tell me how to get to... And the video said, always start with, excuse me. Be polite, especially in a new place.
Politeness goes a long way, because you're relying on strangers being nice.
And even a simple question like, how far is it to the airport? Can be huge.
Totally. To figure it out if you have enough time so you don't miss your flight.
Exactly. And they even had stuff for when you're really lost, like, excuse me, which way to the bus stop?
Oh, I've been there. Holding the map upside down, hoping someone will just point and save me.
Sometimes you need more than a map. You need a human.
Big time. But it's not just getting places, it's those little everyday things that come up. I liked how they had, is there a grocery store nearby?
Oh yeah, sometimes you just want a snack, not another fancy meal.
Exactly. So even a few basic phrases can make you feel more in control.
More confident, like you can handle things on your own.
Okay, fast forward to the airport. That's always a little stressful.
Definitely. So many announcements, so many people rushing around.
Easy to get overwhelmed.
But the video, it breaks it down into easy steps. Starting with, excuse me, where's the airline counter?
Simple, but that's how you find your way in that giant building.
And once you've checked in, made it to the gate, it's about knowing when to board.
Yeah.
So ask, when will the plane be boarding?
Then you can relax a bit, grab some coffee.
Right. Or do those last-minute emails.
Without panicking that you'll miss the flight.
They thought of everything. Even I missed my connecting flight, which hopefully you'll never need.
Knock on wood. But good to know what to say if it happens.
Exactly. Okay, you made it. You're at your destination. Time for the hotel. So walk in. Hello, I have a reservation under.
Nice and simple, clear and confident.
And once you're in your room, those "can I get" phrases are super useful.
Yeah, extra towels, more pillows, even room service if you're feeling fancy.
It's about knowing how to ask for what you need, politely,
And they even had stuff for breakfast, like, is breakfast included and what time is it served?
Important questions. Breakfast can make or break your day, especially if you're going sightseeing.
For sure. Nobody wants to explore on an empty stomach. Okay, so we've covered planning, arriving, settling in. Now, what about when you get back home? Time to share those stories.
Yes. The video had some great phrases to make your stories come alive.
Right, like you're not just giving a boring report.
Starts with, have you ever been to?
Yeah, to see if they know the place, if they've been there too.
And then, time for the highlights. My favorite thing was, or did you see the...
It's like you're painting a picture with words.
But they also said, talk about stuff that's not the usual tourist spots.
Like, my favorite places are off the beaten path, yeah.
It makes your stories more interesting, more real.
I like that. It's not just about checking things off a list.
It's about those special moments that make the trip memorable.
And of course, they mentioned the tourist trap thing too.
Oh yeah, sometimes those famous places are just too crowded.
And expensive.
It's okay to say that. Be honest, be a smart traveler. Find what you like, even if it's not in the guidebook.
And to end the story, nothing beats, I can't wait to go back.
It makes people want to travel too, to experience those places.
It's like the adventure isn't over, just waiting for the next trip.
And that's what's so great about learning languages.
Yeah.
It opens up the world, It connects us to other people and places.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've tackled those tricky phrasal verbs.
We have.
Learned how to ask good questions, even got tips for traveling.
It's been a journey. And the big lesson, language is more than just words. It's how we connect, how we express ourselves, how we understand everything.
That's so true.
So keep practicing, keep being curious, keep asking those questions.
Right.
That's how you become a confident speaker, someone who's at home anywhere in the world.
Exactly. And to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this thought.
Okay.
As you go out there, pay attention to how you talk, the words you choose, the way you connect with others. What does your language say about you? About where you come from, your view of the world? Something to think about as you keep learning.
Until next time, happy diving.